Okay, I have a thumbs up. Excellent, good. And we're only 5 minutes late before we started, which is not too bad, actually. I was expecting worse. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the College of Scotland Hustings, ahead of the May election at this wonderful music box venue here at Edinburgh College. I've got to start with some boring bits, I'm afraid, even more boring than what you've just heard. There is no planned fire alarm, so if you do hear a fire alarm, there's a fire exit to the left there and then over at the door you came in. So in a very orderly fashion, run as fast as you can if you hear one. This is all being recorded, as you might have just gathered from that interlude at the start. It's all being recorded for video and audio, and there is photography, so anything you do say will be taken down in evidence, just for you to be aware before you do. Now, look, it's easy to employ hyperbole at election times, and we all hear a lot of it, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot of it over the next few months, but I think it's almost certainly true to say this is the most important election for the college sector since devolution. The decisions the next government makes may well be existential ones, and so I think it'd be important, wouldn't it, to find out what the 6 people to my right and left have to say about it. Now, I'm going to introduce them. I'm going to do so in order of current seats in the Scottish Parliament, to be entirely non-controversial. So for the next hour or so, nobody here needs to worry about opinion polls. They only need to worry about exactly how many seats they have at the moment. So in order, we have Ben Macpherson, representing the SNP MSP for Edinburgh Northern and Leith. My microphone is not sounding as good as it was. I'm presuming that'll be fixed. There we go. I'm not going to name anybody's new constituencies because all the names have changed and I haven't learned them yet. So we're just going to go for the current ones, which is Edinburgh Northern and Leith, and of course Minister for Higher Education and Further Education as well. We have Miles Briggs, Conservative MSP for Lothians. Even the lists are changing. I'm not even going to try that either. And Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills. We have Paul O'Kane, the same job title, Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills, and Labour MSP for West of Scotland. Now we get on to the multiple job titles. Ross Greer, who is co-leader of the Greens and finance spokesperson and education spokesperson. Another multiple job title for Willie Rennie, who is economy spokesperson and education spokesperson.
You've missed it, welfare.
And communities.
Yeah, welfare.
Yeah, and
well.
welfare.
Yeah.
Anything else? Everything else. Everything else. And of course, MSP for North East Fife. New name of constituency?
Fife North East.
Oh.
God, we're radical in that
There's
part
a
of the
whole
world.
lot of hustling as to whether this is necessary to move one word in a name. But anyway, there we go. And last but not least, Reform UK MSP for Central Scotland, Graham Simpson, and spokesperson on everything. Everything. Yeah, however, you will have to wait a few minutes before we hear from them, because I'm firstly going to head over to the poser table, I believe is what they call it, to Gavin Donoghue, Chief Executive of College of Scotland, and Angela Cox, who is Chair of the College Principals Group and also Principal at Ayrshire College. I see a document here, Gavin. Yeah. Why don't you tell us about it?
Good morning, everybody. I'm not sure this one's on. I might borrow this one. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the launch of our College of Scotland Manifesto, Opportunity That Works. You'll see that there's a copy in everybody's seats, so I'm not going to say too much about the contents of it. I'm sure you will read it at your leisure, and our political panel have had it in advance as well. We are keen to get on with the hustings, but just want to say a couple of words first, if I may. I'm very grateful to Audrey and our team at Edinburgh College for allowing us to launch the manifesto and hold the hustings today at the Edinburgh College Sighthill campus, because actually this place has been an anchor institution in my own life. In my teens, I came here as part of a school-college partnership. I studied for one of my hires, having went to school down the road at St Augustine's, and the way you were treated like an adult here, and the more tutorial, discursive style of teaching was something that spurred me on into my own educational journey. In my 20s, I returned with £200 in my pocket with my independent learning account to study teaching English as a foreign language. Probably one of the most intellectually humbling experiences of my life, when I realised that the classmates I had from around the world knew more about the English language than I did. So luckily for everybody, it was not a career that I pursued. And now in my 40s, I come here every Saturday morning. I bring my 11-year-old son to this very room so that he can do performing arts in his own community. And the reason I bring this up isn't because it's a particularly unique story, but actually I think it's very common up and down the country. We've got colleges up and down the length and breadth of our country performing this community anchor role in every community that we have. And we've got hundreds of thousands of people getting the benefit of a college education and getting the skills that they need to get into good jobs and rewarding careers. So that's why I think the next Parliament is incredibly important. I'm very grateful for our political panellists today, because I think we need to collectively ensure that we have sustainable colleges going forward, so that we have the skills engines of our economy and community anchor institutions. So with that, I'm just going to pass on to Angela Cox, Chair of the College Principals Group.
Good morning, and thank you to everyone on the panel. We're looking forward to hearing your contributions this morning. As Principal of Ayrshire College, I have the privilege every day of witnessing the life-changing impact colleges have on our young people, our older adults, and the crucial role that we play in partnership with many industry partners in providing the workforce that Scotland needs now and in the future. Unfortunately, I've also seen the lost opportunity within our communities when colleges are not able to provide those life-changing opportunities for people or enable our industries to thrive, because we're turning away thousands of people each year, or the system is not enabling us to respond. Opportunity is the bread and butter of colleges. It's why we exist. Creating and providing positive opportunities is what we do. And my colleagues in the room here today will be able to give you many, many brilliant examples of how we do this. Our data tells us that students who come to a college have an outstanding experience, and the vast majority progress positively and achieve their ambitions across their lifetime. I'm really pleased that Opportunity That Works, which colleges have fed into and stand behind, puts forward a wide range of policy ideas that would help us now and help us in the future. The manifesto, which we're hoping to persuade you of all today, has a very clear set of solutions which the sector would really welcome from the next Scottish Government. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Right, okay, I'm going to go back over. St Augustine's. The First Minister went to Forrester, so you've got a natural little rivalry going there for negotiation afterwards. A few years ahead of me, yeah, a few years ahead. Right, okay, thank you both. You guys can take a comfy seat as we hear from the political panel. I'm going to come first to Ben Macpherson, as I said I would, in seat order. Ben, give us your reflections on what you've heard there generally, and maybe you could also give us a bit of insight. We won't tell anybody as to what's going to be in the SNP manifesto when it comes to the college sector.
Thanks very much, and thanks to College Scotland and all involved for organising today's hustings. And I think it's a very opportune and timely opportunity to come together to consider, as we are doing in a partnership approach, what is next. And I think this publication is a very helpful contribution at this time, because not only with the election coming in just a number of weeks ahead of us, but also because it dovetails with and complements the work that the Scottish Government is already engaged in with our partners in College Scotland and the Scottish Funding Council. And indeed, this is a new chapter with a 10% increase in the budget and a programme of work with the tripartite discussions that have gone on for some time, and how we together are thinking about how we bring them together into a process of how do we land collectively in a place where we agree what the solutions are going forward and work together. And indeed, just last week, the First Minister, the Education Secretary and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and myself met with the College of Scotland and the SFC to discuss further about how we, in a collegiate way and in a process of mutual determination to support the college sector, not just financially and sustainably, but what reform needs to be done as well to meet the demand that's been talked about, to meet the challenges of the next quarter of the 21st century, and all the collective need that we're going to have to be agile with the disruption of technology and the demands of the 21st century economy. There is huge opportunity, and I think this is an exciting chapter to look forward as to what our college sector can deliver, along with the wider post-16 offering with universities undertaking a process of considering what they need to do in the next quarter of the 21st century as well, and the new legislation that's been passed by Parliament around apprenticeships. So this is a really exciting time, both to respond and to react, but also to work together. And I think this document, this proposal for the election, is really helpful in that regard, especially in a time where we do have, continued UK austerity, so resources are pressured, and how we allocate resources is only going to become even more important, so that we realise opportunity and make sure that we're doing that to grow the economy, tackle poverty, and work towards the net zero agenda as well.
Ben, just before I go to Miles, can I just ask you explicitly, there has been about a 20% real terms cut in funding in the last 5 years because of the flat cash settlements. I think it's fair to say the sector was pleased at the budget announcement of a headline 10% uplift. But I think it's also fair to say the sector did not see that as any kind of permanent or long-term solution, more as a sticking plaster. Can I ask you do you accept that was a short-term solution at the budget? And I suppose furthermore, do you see the sort of reform you're talking about as being a tinker or an evolution or a revolution?
Well, first of all, I don't think it was a sticking plaster, and I'm happy to be corrected if this is the case, but my understanding is the way it was welcomed by the sector was not only would it help in this financial year to meet the pressures and concerns, but also that it created some headroom to reform and to take that process forward. And I think that's really important. What I would say is that in terms of previous budgets and financial pressures, obviously the Scottish Government, since the SNP came to power, has had to wrestle with UK austerity since 2010, Brexit, pandemic, the inflation that's hit all of us, and the lack of an appropriate response from UK government using its treasury powers to meet that, arguably. So we do have a fixed budget, as everybody knows. But what I would say is that by making the investment now, we are creating both the resource to respond to the need, aware that and appreciative of the fact that colleges have had to make really difficult decisions in recent years, and we understand that. But now is an important and exciting time to look forward and work together. And obviously we're going into a period where there's a new parliamentary term, there's a new period of consideration after the election about budget setting for that parliamentary term. But what we want to do is get into a position with the sector where we're agreeing what resource is required, not just to meet the demands of the learners and the economy, but also to undertake the change that is necessary to make sure we have a college sector that continues to improve.
Okay, good, thank you. I think I'm sure we'll come back to the whole funding question. Miles, let me come to you. I read one of your evening news columns at the back end of last year, and you said, and I've got it here, colleges are being held back while businesses cry out for vital skilled workers. And you also said that colleges should be front and centre of a skills revolution. So, in a wide sense in relation to your manifesto, but also if you want to pick up on the funding point as well, please do. What would you actually do about it?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm pleased someone reads that column, to be honest. Thank you, Andy. So I think we need to take stock, and Ben did some of that over the last 5 years. I don't think this Parliament's been good for our college sector, and I think we need to be honest about that Parliament's decided not to prioritise funding for the sector, and just this budget is a welcome step forward. But I hope, and all of us are here today, we have to make a commitment that the next Parliament will do things differently, that the sector will get the resource it needs. And what you put forward in this document, I think, is really an exciting opportunity to hear from yourselves, but also some of the challenges you accept the sector also has to reform and take forward. So I think there's an opportunity for whoever's forming the next government, whoever's in the next Parliament, to try to take that forward. And we will have to do that collectively. Now, in terms of funding, the university sector is currently having a review, and I would like to see the college sector have a review ahead of the election as well. I think that then gives us all opportunities on the other side of this election to look at different funding models. And I say that across the whole spectrum, because I think we need to now look towards infrastructure. Some of the work we've done, Willie and I and Paul, on, and Ross, sorry, on Education Committee around this has been, I don't think we're really being realistic about the challenges in infrastructure spend the sector's facing. So we need to look at, I think, different financial models to make the sector sustainable and that long-term opportunity which we all want to see. And so to answer your final point of the question in terms of skills, every single business I speak to in Edinburgh, and I know Edinburgh is overheated as part of the Scottish economy, but businesses are crying out for key sector skills, which we've got shortages in. Most of those are in the college sector. And until we do something about the credit system to actually allow the sector to bring more people in, to train them up and get them out into the businesses, we're not going to grow our economy. So I think that's a final part of this jigsaw as well, that we need to review the credit system and create that opportunity for more people to go to colleges. We've lost 100,000 places over the course of this Parliament, so over the course of SNP government. So I think there's a real need now for us to take forward these 3 reforms early in the next session of Parliament. I would do that, and we would, in our manifesto, put that forward as a skills bill to pick up some of the work which the higher and tertiary education bill didn't manage to take forward.
Okay, good, right. Let me move on to Paul. Paul, last week you said that Labour would end the SNP snobbery and support colleges. You might argue that snobbery started under the Blair administration when more and more people were pushed towards university instead of colleges. Is that a fair assessment? And in hindsight, is that something that was a mistake?
I think we need to be honest. I think we're trying to have an honest conversation that over a period there has been a sort of imbalance, I think, in terms of universities versus other avenues that people will take, particularly post their secondary education. I think there has been a catalogue of things that have led to very often the devaluing of college courses, of apprenticeships, of all of those things. You know, I squarely was pointing to the context within devolution where I do think colleges have been undervalued by this current government, and I do think part of the conversation we're having this morning about a lack of investment, a lack perhaps of vision, I think that has definitely added to that. I think what is clear is both at a UK level and a Scottish level, we are really talking about how do we refocus that, and that's a lot of what the Prime Minister was putting forward at the party's last conference. It was a lot of what we've been saying in Scotland about the opportunities that exist. So for me, it is about saying we have wonderful resources in our colleges. We have skills, we have the expertise, we have organisations that are at the heart of their communities. And it's how do we tap in and support that so that we can move it forward. But I would recognise a lot of the challenges that have been put forward, both by Ben and by Miles, indeed, in terms of the sustainability of that. So there's clearly, you know, in terms of that ongoing revenue issue, which I think we're already started to touch on. Obviously, the budget increase is welcomed. We need to see a sustainability to that. There's a massive issue in terms of capital that I don't think we're talking about. I think Miles touched on this. I've been meeting college principals, still fairly new in the job, but getting around and talking to college principals, and I recognise the real concern that if there were to be a catastrophic failure in terms of the actual buildings our colleges are in and the resources that are there, that is going to have a huge, huge impact, and I don't think we're talking about that. And of course, I think purpose and meaning for colleges, because all of this for me links back to how do we create that equality of opportunity, and what that does is help people to move ahead, to move on, to get out of poverty very often. And I think the big, and it's in your manifesto here front and centre, how do we use all of the resources and talents within our colleges and all of the energy in order to do that poverty reduction piece? And that's about bringing things back that were working, because we know that, for example, the Flexible Workforce Development Fund was working. We know that many of the innovations colleges were making to get to learners, to meet them where they're at, to give them the support they need to get ahead, that was working. The problem is we have a system of funding that is probably far too constrained in terms of that cash versus credits, and we need to look at that. So yes, do I hold my hands up and say that at times in the past my party have been guilty of perhaps prioritising one sector over another? I think that's fair to say. I think that has been the story in devolution as well, but we need to now take this opportunity in time to reset that.
I'm just going to come to Ross in a wee second, but just what you're talking about, you introduced the capital aspect of it as well, which I think is an important one. We'll come back to it, but we're not talking about small sums of money. The gap is not small. From a manifesto perspective, are you looking simply at an increase in funding, and therefore how, or are you looking at system change here in terms of the way that the funding takes place?
Well, you know, I could sit here and tell everybody that we're just going to promise the earth in terms of funding. Now, I don't think that would be credible. I think I might get laughed out of the room if I said, look, there's a quick solution to this. We have to look at, in the same way that we're doing in the university sector, look at the overall picture, and that is, of course, about how do we get more sustainable funding into the system, but how do we innovate? And I say that, so, I'm not, everybody in this room is innovating. I'm not saying that as though I've got some wizard wheeze that's going to fix it, but I think we have to get round the table in the way that we're doing with the university sector and have that honest conversation, because, as you say, Andy, these are not small sums of money. The kind of on the cliff edge for a lot of colleges in terms of their buildings and their resources is a big, big worry. So it's going to have to be that broad, that honest conversation. And what our manifesto is going to reflect is not sort of wizard wheezes and short-term fixes and promises that don't get delivered. It's going to be about a direction of travel and going on that direction of travel with everyone in this room in order to try and get a sustainable solution for the future.
Okay, good. We're getting there. We're halfway around the panel. We're almost getting there. Ross Greer, let me ask you with two of your hats on, finance and education. You were close to the administration under the Butte House Agreement, of course. What lessons do you take from the college sector in particular? What lessons do you take from your closeness to government at that time, what you saw happening, and what are you taking into the manifesto that you're learning from that?
Yeah, so first of all, I mentioned the budget a minute ago. I was pleased with the budget uplift this year. It was the top ask in the letter that the Greens sent to the Finance Secretary. I believe it was also the top ask from the Lib Dems, so I'm glad that we've reached a positive place on that. I do think the phrase sticking plaster is probably a fair description, though. And my reflection on, especially the two and a half year period where we were in government, I'd reflect on what Andrew was saying around missed opportunities, because it's not just missed opportunities for individuals and communities, but I think we've had a missed opportunity for the whole sector here. When we were in government, the Scottish Government, Kate Forbes was leading it at this point, developed the National Strategy for Economic Transformation. It's supposed to be the Scottish Government's economic and industrial strategy. Problem was it wasn't strategic or transformative. So what should have been that really high-level document that provided clear direction, not just to the college sector, but that would have been one of the sectors that would have got a real sense of what it was government was trying to do and what it expected everybody else to contribute to. I think the NZET was a missed opportunity. It didn't provide that clear direction because you can't be all things to all people. And that's certainly what we found when we were in government, was when we were trying to argue that yes, certain sectors need to be prioritised, certain sections of the economy. If we want to be a world leader in, for example, film and TV, can we also be a world leader in video games, to pick two sectors in roughly a similar place? We can't do everything. The NZET was a missed opportunity. And then off the back of that, we had the Purpose and Principles document for post-school education, which again I think was a missed opportunity. I've sat on Parliament's Education Committee for 10 years, and for so much of that, the college sector in particular, but other parts of education, have come to us and said, we just want to know what the Scottish Government actually expects of us here, and we can start planning around that. The NZET was a missed opportunity to do that. Purpose and Principles document was a missed opportunity to do that. So at that kind of highest level, I think we need the government to be really, really clear about what it wants. And it's not just economic need, much as that's important. There's also wider social and environmental needs as well. But the combination of the economic strategy, the climate plan, the child poverty reduction plan, etc., these should all be being brought together and then distilled into something that can be given to each sector and say, here is what we need you to contribute towards our objectives for Scotland. That kind of coherence, that clear ministerial direction, I think is the lack of that is upstream of so many of the specific problems that we've faced. I'd very happily get into the detail, the finance side of it. Hopefully we'll have more time to do that. But just to pick one example there, the Scottish Government had the opportunity to introduce an infrastructure levy. So if you were Cala, Barrett, etc., a big volume house builder, if you were building a big estate, you would have to make a contribution to the other infrastructure that a community would need. Now, I would argue that colleges should have been in a position to receive some of that, because you don't just need to build primary schools, health centres, etc. If you're building communities, you need colleges to have the right facilities. So that would help towards the capital issue. The Scottish Government decided not to bring that in, despite the fact Parliament had voted for an infrastructure levy. The Government has decided not to bring it in, and there's a sunset clause in this May. So it's one of those missed opportunities. I think if we'd had that clearer, coordinated leadership from across government, rather than everything being so siloed, we would have been in a far better position to address these issues. So to me, the kind of main point of learning is that lack of cross-portfolio ministerial direction, that's the root cause of so many of the missed opportunities over the last decade.
Okay, interesting. Willie, Ross mentioned the budget. There are, if my figures are right, it costs about £10,000 per year per place in secondary education, and just under £8,000 goes towards university education per place. It's under £6,000 that goes towards a college place. Ross mentioned, as a spokesman for the Liberal Democrats, that it was top of your list of requests for the budget.
We're very collegiate. Shared credit.
I think I'm right in saying that in Jamie Green's letter it didn't feature as part of the final agreement with the SNP. Can you just talk us through that process and how your discussions went with the government over colleges in particular?
I mean, colleges has been an important part of our negotiations for a number of years now. I mean, last year there was the specific agreements around about social care and offshore wind. This year, the 10% uplift. And it has been in previous years before that as well. Jamie did a very good job this year, and I think managed not just to get, I think, a one-year uplift, but got a change in approach. Because the rhetoric that went around from the Finance Secretary around this was that this sector was key for dealing with their child poverty ambitions. Now, I would describe that as economic inactivity rates as part of that, because Scottish economic inactivity bounces around between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. We cannot sustain a country on such high levels of economic inactivity, both for their own well-being, but also for the country's finances. And this sector is key to making that happen. And that was, from Shona Robeson, that was a key part of her contribution. But it can't just be a one-year hit. This has to be a sustained change in approach. If for no other reason, is that you need certainty about what you're planning to do, and your staff need certainty, because industrial relations over the last 10 years plus have been pretty atrocious, and that needs to change. And I think the finances that will be available through this, and hopefully in future years, might help you create a better circumstances so that staff stop looking over their shoulder and they start looking towards what they can do next. Now, I think the key part of your manifesto here that I really like is the whole flexibility piece. Flexibility in terms of the credit system. So I went to Dundee and Angus College, and they took me down to see the apprenticeship plumbers. And they told me that this year, the numbers were way down what they were in previous years, partly because of employer confidence through minimum wage, but also employers' national insurance contributions. But they said they had no flexibility to take on the people who would have been training as plumbers through the apprenticeship scheme into the college itself to do an HNC or any other kind of qualification. We need to have a system that is flexible enough to flex to the economic needs, to the learner needs, so that we are not leaving young people on the scrap heap without an opportunity to do something. So we need a system that flexes. But the system we have now is far too rigid, it's siloed, we need to have the movement. Now, I think the worst thing we could do in year one, after bringing in the tertiary education bill, would be to move money from apprenticeships into the FE sector, because that would send the wrong signal to apprenticeships and to companies. But I think what we do need is a system that does flex in future years, backwards and forwards, in a way that meets all of those needs. But secondly, on flexibility, is we need to allow colleges to borrow more and to keep more of their surpluses, so that they can invest themselves in their buildings and the opportunities that they see as the economy evolves across the country. And if we can give that greater flexibility without endangering any ONS classification, looking at what we've learned from Wales and what's happening in England, as well as what local authorities do, then we've got a chance of seeing a kind of an approach that might be sustainable for the longer term. So I see a glimmer of hope. I think there is a recognition now that for years you were undervalued. You in terms of the pecking order of nurseries, schools, primary, universities, although you were important, when the chips were down, other areas got the finance. And I think now, for all the reasons I've set out, I think there is a full understanding that the economic well-being of the country, but also of learners, is central to what you do. And I think, and I hope, that there will be a sustained approach that will see you grow and fill all of those needs.
Okay, thank you. We are going to come back to that borrowing point, I hope, a little later on. Graham Simpson, patiently waiting. Second in a lot of polls, but sixth today, I'm afraid. But here you are. Could you, I think it's probably fair that we know less about reform policy on colleges than we know about the policy of other parties on colleges. So can you start fill in the blank sheet of paper for us a little bit here? Feel free to pick up on anything you've heard, but give us an idea of what reform's approach to colleges and to the sector is going to be.
Well, if you've been paying attention to the rally that we had in Falkirk and my speech at the rally, which was overshadowed by Malcolm Offord appearing on stage, then you would have heard me speaking about colleges. You would have heard me speaking about the budget, and you'd have heard me say that I wanted colleges to get more money in the budget. You would have heard me say that given the rally was in Falkirk on the doorstep of Grangemouth and all the job losses that we've had in that area, that it was frankly ludicrous that the local college, Forth Valley, was and still is considering closing a campus. You'd have heard all that. So you would have known that my view is that colleges are really, really important to the economy of Scotland. And if you'd followed my political career, you'd know that I've got 3 colleges in my region, which I've visited many times over the years. We've got South Lanarkshire College, I know the principal is here today, New College Lanarkshire and Forth Valley. And I've also visited a number of other colleges. In fact, interestingly, just in the past week, I've had college principals reach out to me from other parts of Scotland. I'll tell you who they are, Dumfries, and I had a very interesting conversation with a college that I didn't know existed, was the Gaelic College on Skye. And that was a really, really interesting conversation. And one thing in the manifesto here is that we should embrace that diversity in the college sector, and I think that's right. The other thing, and I can relate to this, going back to school a long, long time ago, is trying to establish more links with schools. And when I was at school in Carlisle, I did an A-level at my local tech college. So I left school, well, I didn't leave school. I walked from school to do my A-level in economics at Carlisle Tech College. It was fantastic. I loved it because I was there in a class with people of all ages. And I think if colleges, I know some are doing it, I think the experience for young people of mixing with people of different ages, getting used to that college environment is fantastic. Now, Ben said earlier, it's an exciting time. Well, I don't hear that from the sector. They can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there'll be many people here who think it's an exciting time. You've had your budget cut by 20% in real terms over the last 5 years. Yes, there's been a bit of an uplift this time, but it doesn't make up for that cut. It'll be an exciting time if the government and the next Parliament gives this sector what it deserves, which is more investment over a number of years. That would make it an exciting time. It's not an exciting time now because people are still considering making cuts. We've still got a college estate, that's the buildings, which in some parts of Scotland is crumbling. I know that because I also, and you'd know, if you'd done your research, Andy, you would know that I sit on the Public Audit Committee. You would also know that that committee did a piece of work on colleges where we heard about the state of the college sector. So Andy, even though you're a mate, you should have done your research better. I'm really in favour of colleges and I want to see them succeed.
Well, I do know a fair bit about you, Graham. I must admit, I'm not. I just don't think all the audience watch party conference speeches. So,
What?
Apologies if I
Wash your mouth.
have asked the wrong question. Let me know. Let's crack it on a little bit. So, I think the first thing is let's now we've had a nice long first answer, so let's have much shorter answers for the next few questions. So we're going to get round a lot more issues after that. But Graham, I'm going to flip it straight back to you. As we kind of move into talking a bit more about skills, and just based on what you've outlined there, do you see the economy becoming more dependent on college-educated people and college skills than it was before, or do you think it has always been the same?
I think it needs to become more focused on colleges because I think they can deliver the skills that Scotland needs. But I also think that some of the liaisons that colleges are striking with universities is important, so that colleges can deliver degrees, and that's going on in parts of the sector. I think that's important, but colleges are absolutely vital to the future of Scotland and the future economy of Scotland. We need to accept that. So if we want to deliver the skills that the country needs, if we want the economy to boom, then colleges are absolutely essential to that.
So, Miles, you've mentioned quite a bit in the past as well about, from an Edinburgh perspective, about colleges and universities and the way that they interact together. What's your perspective on that? As we look at quite significant skill shortages coming up over the next few years. You might argue that the places those skill shortages are, renewables, food and drink, tourism, health and social care, etc., they point towards colleges a lot more than they point towards anything else. Is that? Do you see that being the case, that we need to elevate colleges even more than other options?
Yeah, so the top 25 key sector skill shortages will all be trained in colleges across our country. We're just not getting these people through the sector. So I think we've got to be honest that, yes, the people our economy need could be trained in this very building right now if we were more flexible. That's why I wonder, and it goes back to your point over levels of funding, is there a different model for government, even at this budget, to have said, these are the skill shortages, we'll fund you more if you get these people through the credit system reform. So I think there's lots of opportunities to look at how we get these people. I think we also need to get back to when devolution was reconvened in the Scottish Parliament, we used to talk about lifelong learning. No one ever wants to talk about that now because it's just young people getting an opportunity. I think we need to really look at that upskilling and retraining element. And there's a lot of conversation, don't get me wrong, over opportunities for oil and gas workers to do that. But the economy here in Edinburgh needs people to have that opportunity to upskill, for older workers to look at that retraining opportunity. And so, I know so many people who say, I just can't do that unless the businesses they're working in are helping to fund that. Some of the construction sector are doing some really good work to make sure they can retain people by providing that opportunity. But that goes back to a much wider piece over how are we going to properly, sustainably fund the sector. And I think there's lots of exciting opportunities around that, but we'd need government to provide more flexibility how the sector can make that happen.
So, Ben, can I come back to you then? You're the Minister for both, and I don't think we're not talking here, of course, about picking and choosing, but have we got the balance right between college and university in terms of the focus that goes on them? You heard me mention the figures to Willie earlier on about the per place cost. Is the balance right here, or do we need to redress it a little bit?
Well, in my short yet eventful time in this role, I have been very motivated by the sense of opportunity that we have collectively. And that's what I meant by an exciting time ahead, because the technological change is coming at us. The greater pressure of international competitiveness is real, and we have to get ready for it. And for me, we have to work cohesively across the system, and that's why we can't think of colleges just in themselves. We have to think about it with universities, with apprenticeships, and with skills planning. And we'll be updating Parliament very shortly on skills planning and the work that's happening there to make sure that when the letter of guidance goes from ministers to the Scottish Funding Council, that we're providing that coherent picture of funding. And that's where the balance can change if we need to meet the demand and if that's the right thing to do. Certainly, the parity of esteem journey that we're on as a society, I think, cannot be underestimated. And that's where the Withers Review and the implementation of that and other initiatives are so important. We need to undertake that social change as a country that we want people to realise their potential through the best pathway that's right for them. And yes, that's about older people reskilling and upskilling as well as the young people at the beginning of their career and their journey.
Can I ask a question of Ben?
Okay.
I'm not trying to catch him out, but there is a review of university funding going on at the moment, and you invited all parties to take part in discussions, which is great. Do you not think, though, that there should also be a review, and probably you should have done it at the same time, into college funding?
So I'm very determined, working with Colleges Scotland in a collegiate way, and the Funding Council and any other appropriate partners, that we will set that in motion formally before the Parliament rises, so that we have both of those processes running in tandem, talking to each other and being coherent, so that the next Parliament has the opportunity to work both processes through together. And that's how we will realise the huge potential of the economic growth that's possible and the skilling of those learners that we want to provide for, and we want them to be able to go and do their best for themselves and for the common good.
Paul, Ben just talked about parity of esteem between the two. You asked last week to end the snobbery. That's the same thing in different words, isn't it? I mean, can you work with that?
Yeah, look, we've been talking about parity of esteem for a long time, and I think there's consensus. I don't want, there is a lot of consensus. I think it's just about direction. I mean, I think a lot of what Ben says has merit in terms of those opportunities for the future. What I said to Ben during the tertiary education bill is actually a lot of those developments are here now. We're living them. We're seeing technology move at a pace. We're seeing defence increase in terms of the focus, the spend. So we don't want to be playing catch-up. And I feel that many people feel they're having to play catch-up because they haven't been able to do the sort of preparatory work, the front-loading, putting things in place. So we need to be realistic about that. But I think a lot of what colleagues are saying has merit. I think there is consensus. I think it's now about how do we take that opportunity that Ben's now committed to in terms of setting that in train, that we can all be engaged in that conversation and get into the next Parliament. It means we're not starting from fresh. We're starting actually with a set of ideas that people are broadly signed up to.
Okay. Actually, I was going to come to Willie. Let me ask Ross something first, and then I'll come to Willie. A lot of this, I think it seems to be, is what we see colleges as. Are they educators of kids from school, or are they suppliers of a workforce, effectively? Give us your take on that. I mean, is that an artificial construct, or where do you see that on the spectrum?
I think there's certainly a danger that it becomes a debate around how do we create the most efficient units of labour. Clearly, colleges play an absolutely essential role in providing a skilled workforce, particularly for the private sector. But it's not just that. Think of the brilliant work that Ayrshire College is doing with the Health Board in terms of the workforce development pipeline for nursing, for example. The secondary economic benefits of having a good health service are absolutely obvious, but if the entire sector is built around meeting the direct needs of business, then you're going to start seeing these gaps in areas like that, where there's clearly that wider societal need. That comes back to the point I was making earlier. Of, we're all talking about, and the question that you posed to start this section was what the kind of skills shortages that we've got, are they the kind of skills that are going to be filled by colleges? Well, that depends on what kind of economy we all actually want Scotland to have. And we had that total missed opportunity. There was supposed to be a national economic strategy. It's not strategic. It doesn't set a direction. So when we were in government, we were responsible for energy efficiency and building standards. One of the things that we need to do is train a whole new workforce to install and maintain heat pumps. The place that you start doing that is with your existing gas boiler engineers, because otherwise you're going to have that workforce is generally, it skews massively towards people over the age of 50, so people who would be in real danger of struggling to get another job if they were made redundant. You start by retraining them before even bringing new folk in. But we found it almost impossible when we were in government to get cross-portfolio working going on that. So within the portfolio that Patrick Harvey was the minister for, they created a workforce plan, trying to get engagement sideways with the Education Directorate, with SFC, etc. on that. It was incredibly difficult, despite the fact that we had companies who wanted to, thinking of the wider supply chain benefits, it wasn't just those who wanted to install and maintain heat pumps. We had companies who wanted to invest in Scotland to build the factories to make them in the first place. We had one, the Mitsubishi factory, but because we've missed that opportunity in terms of how we're incentivising people to make that transition, we've also missed an investment opportunity there where companies have gone elsewhere in the world to set up these factories to make this product. And that point of manufacturing, I think, is key here. As a matter of national security and economic resilience, we need to be thinking about what are the things that either as Scotland, the UK, these islands, including Ireland, and at a European level, what is the stuff that we need to be able to do for ourselves so that we are not dependent on incredibly risky global supply chains. Renewables is an obvious area there. We need to not just be capable of maintaining this stuff once it's been installed here, we need to manufacture it here as well. So one other example just that I'll finish on that, again, is an Ayrshire College one. I'm not here to do paid promotion for Ayrshire, but they do such a good job with the kind of stuff that I like to talk about. It's a company called XLCC, who are trying to set up a factory at the former Hunterston coal terminal to manufacture undersea cables that will overwhelmingly be used for offshore wind. A brilliant example of exactly what we need for the just transition, especially when you think about the fact it's beside a nuclear power station that's decommissioning, so whose workforce are being made redundant. The college have done a brilliant job working directly with XLCC to meet their needs. We're talking about that's going to create probably 100, 150 jobs per year over the next couple of years. No matter how hard I tried, I just could not get sufficient Scottish Government engagement on that, and it's to the credit of the college and the company that they just went ahead with it themselves in the absence of that clear national leadership on these kind of issues. So we won't see the kind of success we want for the sector unless we are absolutely clear about what kind of economy and what kind of society we're trying to build, because we cannot do everything here, and every college cannot be expected to do everything. It looks different in different parts of the country. In Edinburgh, it's one thing. Edinburgh College can try and offer a really wide range of qualifications and do it well. In Glasgow, you've got 3 different colleges, never mind West and the Lanarkshires in the wider region. Each one of them cannot be a centre of excellence in absolutely everything. So that's why you need that kind of regional planning, and to get that kind of regional planning, you need clear national leadership. That's what we've been lacking.
Willie, move this on for us a bit. College of Scotland talk about skills engines and community anchors. It seems to be the intersection between those two things is what you talk about a lot, which is economic connectivity and the whole relationship to poverty. And also it includes what, Ben, you mentioned the ageing workforce as well and the need to retrain older workers, which comes into that too. Talk to us about your thoughts on particularly that economic connectivity issue and where colleges need to fit into that.
Just before actually we move on,
Yeah.
I thought what Ross said was spot on. I think his description of a sector that's varied, plays to its strengths, meets the local economic need. I think that's exactly the kind of system that we do want, and we want national leadership that really incentivise that. So I thought it was a very good description of what we need to try and get to. And I think the country is in real difficulty unless we fully accept that having 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 economically inactive is going to threaten our, I don't want to be overstated, but our very existence. We will end up putting up taxes every single year unless we can get on top of this. And we should therefore, the second piece is to recognise that work is good, because sometimes we're a wee bit queasy about that. Work is a good thing. We should try and inspire people with the aspiration of having a good, well-paid job and a good home so they have a good life. That's what we should aspire to. And sometimes we focus on other measurements outside that. We need to speak to people in the language that they understand, and too often we don't. But a big part of this is the large number of children at school who have additional support needs is through the roof. It's 40+%, 50% in some classes, in some schools. That is a massive problem for future generations, and the school system is struggling to cope with it. That's going to come your way next. And we need to have a system that fully understands that all of those people need to have good, well-paid jobs. So we need a system that reflects that. That's where the community anchor bit comes in. But then that should automatically feed through into the kind of skills engine side of it to make sure that we have got that tie-in with the local employers that Ross was setting out to make sure we have that flow of people. But that's where the interchange between those two measurements are. And to achieve that, we need a sustainable model of finance, and so that you can have a long-term plan to deliver all that. It's actually not rocket science. What it needs to have is a system that's sustainable. And the final thing I'll say is, I think everybody on this platform has got a university degree.
I don't.
I'm
sorry to break it. I lasted all of about 8 weeks, but because I got a job.
I haven't got one either.
All right, okay.
Do your research.
Sorry.
You've crushed my point.
Cut you off at the knees.
But too often, people in leadership positions in politics have gone through the university system. And although we often talk about colleges as being important, when the chips are down, you don't get the support that we need from the system, because we are under pressure from others who have gone through university system as well, who are very good at telling the story about the value of universities, and that gets the sway. And we therefore need to work really hard to fight against that pressure so that colleges can have that sustainable funding for the longer term.
Miles, you want to come in? I'm going to go to the floor for some questions, but I think the first question I'm going to take is going to allow you to make the point you were going to make, because I think it's on a pretty similar subject. So I'm not trying to read minds. I might have got this completely wrong. Let's find out in a second. Adam Lowe is president of the Student Association here, and you have a question for us, Adam. Now, sorry, I should have mentioned, we do have roving mics right here, so we'll get to you in a second. We'll all just have 10 seconds of relaxation while we get to Adam. We're all being very well behaved, including the panel, which is good. Oh, down this way, a bit further down.
Yellow, yeah.
I was going to say yellow jumper. I think it's a mustard jumper, I'm going to say. I think that's the official terminology.
It's Liberal Democrat, yeah.
It is actually a little bit.
If your party gets into government, how will you provide more opportunities for people to get into colleges?
Thank you. Now, I'm not going to go to every single person on the panel for every single question. If you want to jump in, shout. I know that Miles, I'm going to go to Miles on this one because he was trying to jump in.
This feels like a setup now.
It's definitely not. It's an improvisation rather than a setup.
So Willie was complaining earlier that one of my colleagues, I think, had said he was the father of the house to him in Parliament, and how young he actually is. That's impossible. But I agree with what Willie just said there. And I think one of the key things which I've seen in the year, sort of 14 months I've had the education portfolio, the best thing going on in Scotland at the minute is the school-college partnerships. And I would love to see them turbocharged. And actually for that opportunity to really value the pathway, which many young people who are the furthest removed from our education system get a taste for, and then get into something which will make sure they have a career. And often some of the school visits I've done, that is talking to them about what actually do they want from their lives. And at the minute, our system, which is looking to young people and a positive destination, is failing people. And I think we need to really look at actually how do we make sure there is that clear pathway for someone to get from school to college earlier, if that's what they want, and that's what's going to build success for them. And I think that's where, therefore, what does that look like? And having these conversations that we have spent the whole of the last 25 years saying university is the final destination for you. It shouldn't be. And actually the opportunity to get a trade, to actually have a safe career, which is what people are asking for. So many people working in call centres will have a major problem in the next decade that these will all be AI'd. I've done a couple of calls recently where they've been an AI call and it's worked. And I've been surprised, given my technological understanding, that I've managed to do it. But that is a huge risk to so many people working in our economy, especially in the service economy, which we are heavily dependent on in Scotland. So I think we need to look to the future. And I agree with Willie that where is our strengths we can make sure the sector plays up to in whatever part of the country we're in. We're lucky here in Edinburgh that we are a growing economy. There is a major conversation we have not had, and I am a broken record in Parliament on this issue, but there is a shift from west to east in our country. We've literally just built a new constituency in Edinburgh. So we're redrawing the regions in this part of the country, not most of the others, because there's shrinking populations. And we need to understand what that looks like for funding our public services. Lowest funded council, lowest funded health board, and actually the opportunity around education, I don't think for my constituents in Edinburgh is being delivered either. So I think we need to really look at what is the long-term vision for our education system and the wider Scottish economy. And the next Parliament will get this right, or we will not. And the government needs to, I think, really take stock. If it's a government which is re-elected after 19 years, what are the new ideas? And where can we collectively bring forward some of the things we want to see?
Okay, I'm going to come to Ben and Paul in answer to the next question, unless you want to say anything else about Adam's question there. I can go to the next one.
In the interest of time, yeah.
That's fine. Stella McManus. Where's Stella? There you are. Sorry, I should say Stella is Principal and Chief Executive at South Lanarkshire College.
Thanks very much. And also just noticed it's an all-male panel this morning, so I won't ask a question about equality and diversity. So the new Community Wealth Bill really is paving the way for regional devolution across Scotland. So can you outline how you see these devolved structures working and what role you would seek colleges to play in these new structures?
That feels very much like I should throw to you, Ben.
Thanks. First of all, appreciate the point you made initially, and we were speaking about this before the event. And of course, my cabinet secretary would have helped in that regard, and she's obviously wishing this event well, and the finance secretary too. I think the community wealth building legislation is really innovative and world leading, and it's been well documented. Of course, it's we're limited in scope through the devolved settlement and what that can impact and do with not having employment law and company law and corporate law and various taxation measures devolved. But in terms of how do we build wealth through the legislation, but also through other legislation that's complementary, and institutions like our college sector, there's a huge opportunity, because the more we create that local economic growth, SME delivery, and expansion. I mean, the SME sector, of course, is the backbone of the Scottish economy, and one of the changes that we're making through one of the rationales for making the changes through the TEP bill, and that's why the Federation of Small Businesses, for example, supported the TEP bill, was in order to make it a better system for SMEs to be able to take on apprentices. So there's a lot of opportunity ahead, and the implementation of the bill, alongside continuing to develop both the sustainability and success of the college and university sector that I talked about earlier, but also the development of graduate apprenticeships, for example. There's all these opportunities to collate these, and the skills planning that I talked about earlier too. A lot of that will be on a regional basis, and I think one of the questions for all of us is how much do we want to create specialism in different geographies, and community wealth building would of course play a factor within all of that. It's a very big question, but I hope that's given someone else. And just to touch on what Miles said, I mean, I do think how do we create greater awareness in our schooling system is absolutely pivotal to how do we create opportunities for people to go to college if that's the right pathway for them. And the work-based learning proposals within the TEP bill, which build on the foundation apprenticeships that we have at the moment, the more we create opportunities like that, along with consistent careers advice, and continue to develop that, not just through Skills Development Scotland, but also through the Developing the Young Workforce Initiative and through the Careers Collaborative, for example, as all that creates awareness within schooling ages about what's available, I think that helps people find their direction and also lets them test it. And one of the things that we want to do collectively is to get the levels up of people completing courses, because we still have too high numbers of people dropping out, and we need to work collaboratively to reduce that.
Paul, just on Stella's point on regionalisation, I think that's something that Labour is trying to carve a bit of a niche for itself on a sort of regional agenda. How do colleges fit into your idea of what a region means?
Sure. First thing to say is I learned this morning that Stella was taught in primary school by my mum. My mum, by the way, who got her teaching qualification at a teacher training college, not at university, so maybe there's something in that relevant to our discussions this morning. But it's a really good question, it's really important. And we are very clear about the capacity for driving power down out of Holyrood and into our regions. Devolution, the story of devolution was never meant to stop in Edinburgh. It was meant to be about how do you get power down to where it is closest to people and take decisions that actually will impact the most number of people in the communities that people know really, really well. So for me, there's lessons we can learn here from other parts of the UK. We would always point to Greater Manchester as a place that actually has really innovated in terms of the regional powers that were given to the Mayoralty and to the wider sort of authorities there. Colleges are at the heart of that, and I think it's about bringing colleges and employers together in a more focused way on a regional basis to understand a lot of what we've just been talking about in terms of those careers of the future, the technologies, the industries of the future. How can we do that better? And one of I am a fan of the City Region deals, and I think they have done good things. One of my criticisms of them, and I saw this from the council point of view when I was a councillor, is that it became very top-heavy and became very much driven by academic research from universities and sort of all of that sort of stuff, which is important and has its place, but it was not driving down into, for example, the expertise on the ground in the college sector and giving you the resource and the skills to be able to actually drive forward meaningful change. So I think if we see a refocusing of that, it has to be about partnerships within the city regions. And I would say that it's true at every level. I mean, looking at schools, for example, some of the work that was being done on regional improvement among schools, really good concept, but never really got off the ground properly and wasn't funded properly. But you could have colleges and schools sitting together in a more strategic way, in a more regional basis, that would allow people to make those decisions that would actually do that lifelong learning piece that we're talking about this morning.
Okay, thank you. You actually, Paul, you mentioned capital earlier on and the state of some of the buildings. Can I go to Paul Little from City of Glasgow? Because I think the question that you've got, Paul, might provoke a one-word answer, otherwise known in politics as a 25-word answer. So,
our Welsh colleagues are trusted to be able to borrow and hold a surplus. Our English colleagues can do that. They can borrow. Our Northern Irish colleagues could do that. Some 13 years on from regionalisation and the classification, can each of the spokesmen give us a commitment that they're going to relook at that very tight classification, which has us equivalent to central government departments and not local authorities, to borrow and hold a surplus?
So I'm just going to go right round the panel for basically a one-word answer here. Should Scottish colleges, like colleges elsewhere in the UK, be allowed to borrow and be allowed to hold a surplus? Graham Simpson.
I think so.
Okay, good. You don't say anything else? That's it. We're done. Good.
No, but actually, I know we're up against the clock, but I'd really love to hear some opinions from the audience at some point, if we can.
Well, we're
but
trying
the answer
to do
is
that.
yes.
It's a very tight hour for a massive subject, so we're doing our best to get round all the issues that we need to talk about. But I do want to get an answer on this borrowing question, because I think it's quite important for the colleges in the room to understand what the options are for that, especially given the state of the buildings and some of the issues over funding generally. Paul, should they be allowed to borrow?
Yeah, the principle of that is sound, and it should be top of the agenda in terms of that piece of work that's going to be done between colleges and partners.
Okay. Ben?
I think we should be open-minded to it, but again, it should be something that's considered collegiately as part of the work stream of all the partners thinking together about what the future should be. So, open-minded.
Okay.
Yes.
Willie? Ross?
Yes, with really robust governance safeguards. I think the variability of college governance across the country is pretty broad. I absolutely think colleges need that power, but it needs to come with appropriate safeguards. I find it really frustrating that so many of the discussions we have about empowering colleges hit this immediate roadblock of ONS classification. We've just gone through the entire tertiary education bill, loads of the debates about the specifics of that, where how far can we go before the ONS would get involved. My frustration was it appeared that the government hadn't actually asked the ONS at any point through that process. And that's not criticism of Ben, who came in pretty much at the end of that with a fully baked product, baked by someone else. But if we could actually maybe talk to the ONS about this, maybe we would make some progress, because we've lost a decade.
It was not one word, but it was a good point. So I'll
be naughty as well. Yes, because I don't see any other opportunity for the sector. The government won't have this opportunity to provide money. So all the challenges around rack concrete, upgrade, and some of the work we've done in the Education Committee around SRUC, etc., over what will help them move forward, we need to provide that new funding model. And I don't see anything else apart from borrowing powers being made available. It is a good opportunity for many pension funds, I think, to really look at investing. So why not? Why aren't we doing this? Probably should have done it 10 years ago.
Okay, good, thank you. I think we have a question from Magnus Llewellyn. I can't see Magnus. Is Magnus here? Yes? No, I've got a question. You haven't got a question? Well, in that case, I'm going to make Graham Simpson's day, because I'm going to ask if anybody else has got a question that they want to ask. We've got time for one more. David Watt.
Yeah, David Watt, Chair of Briggs College. First of all, Ross, I pick up very strongly your point just made about college governance being variable. And I'd like some evidence of that, please, as the Chair of the College Good Governance Group for Scotland, as well as Chair of College Employers Scotland, as well as Chair of Fife College, and I have no evidence for that whatsoever. It's an assertion that's constantly made by certain people with no evidence to back it up. So I'd like that, first of all. But my bigger point really is about reform. We've talked about reforming the credit system, which is fine, but what other reform is actually going to come to bring the money into this sector that we need? Because without reform, we're not going to have any money. What are you going to do to reform tertiary education?
Okay, my very sophisticated chart here tells me that Willie Rennie hasn't had the chance for a little while to say something, so I'm going to go to you, Willie.
I kind of have set out bits of it. Flexibility is the core of it, I think, in terms of borrowing surpluses, but also flexibility for the credit system. We took evidence from colleges during one of our inquiries, and everybody was waxing lyrical about the relationship with employers, with the Flexible Workforce Development Fund was fantastic. And then they said, right, how much flexibility and what relations do you have with the credit system? And it just went dead. It was tumbleweed. We need to have not just pockets of money like we've secured with the wind, offshore wind, and also the social care sector. We need to have the whole system that drives colleges to work with employers to shape the system, because that way we can get more resource into the system and we can meet their economic needs and skill needs as well. So I think flexibility is the most important thing. Bearing in mind about, we do need to have, this is still a public sector system, but ultimately we need to allow you to do the things that you're good at rather than putting the chains around your arms that we so often do.
Does anybody else have a burning 30-second point on that?
I feel I probably owe David an answer. Specifically, very recently, obviously, we brought in the requirement for all college boards to have both the lecturing and support staff representatives. Until that point, that was a variability. So I think most colleges had a representative of the lecturing staff on the board, but not that many had representatives of support staff. I think that's really important for good governance to make sure that staff voices are heard. So that's a point where we have delivered that consistency, but it's an example of where until very, very recently, we didn't have it. I think we need to look at, make sure that we've got robust arrangements like that. If I could just tie that in with this point around making sure we've got strong regional partnerships, I think there's a very good case for having at least one locally elected councillor on the board of every college. I don't want it to get like what one of our colleagues described as the MGM chorus line, where every college board has to have one of everything on it. But if we want to connect colleges in with councils and make that the conduit for schools, having a local elected representative on the board of every college, which in some cases already happens, but again, I think it's a variability, that individual should be a two-way conduit. They're not just there to govern the college. They should be there to make sure that the links between the college and the local authority, as an education authority in particular, are as robust as possible and we're not missing any opportunities.
Okay, thank you. 10:59. This is going splendidly well. Look, I think we could have gone on for hours, to be honest with you, and I'm sure everybody would have liked to. We've tried to cram in as much as we can to the hour. People might be hanging about for a little bit longer, so if anybody wants to have an additional chat, then please do. Can I just... Oh, are we squeezing one more in? Right. Go on. Please be as concise as is possible.
Willie's going to regret this.
I'm now going to get in terrible trouble.
Hi. Very quick one. A number of our panelists talked about leadership required from government. I would really welcome, very succinctly from each of them, what is your leadership commitment to the sector, please?
Okay, if we can do 30 seconds each, then that's fine. Leadership commitment to the sector. Willie, you've put your hand up, so let's do that.
We will hunt for agreement. It's the most important thing is to try and find a way forward. We are so divisive in politics just now, where everybody just disagrees with each other where they possibly can. We need to change the dynamic so we work together and find agreement on when we sometimes have diverse views. But hunting for agreement is the most important leadership is in this sector that we need.
Okay, I'm going to go from sofa to sofa. Graham.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. And so often in politics, people just disagree for the sake of it, but you actually get more done if you can work together. I've always taken that approach throughout my time, well, as a councillor and an MSP, and we need to see more of that in the next session.
Okay, good. Miles.
So we need to realise the potential of the sector. You know, each and every one of you in your institutions will see that on a daily basis. We're lucky enough to sometimes get to see some of that magic. But I don't think government or the Parliament, all of us on this panel, have really sort of said, where is our college sector? Why isn't it growing? And why can't we make that opportunity happen across our communities? And I think that's where this Parliament's failed. I hope the next one won't. And certainly the Scottish Conservatives, it will be a #1 priority for us.
Paul.
So the role of government in this context is to listen and to build a consensus, and then to show leadership in terms of the direction that it sets to you all, and for you to then push back to government your view of whether we're doing that well and what you're doing. And we have to have set expectations of each other and an honest conversation to move that forward. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck where we've been for a long time. And crucially, not to set false promises, because I think we've had too much of that.
Ross.
I think to the extent that consensus is possible, we need to find consensus on what kind of economy, what kind of society do we actually want for Scotland, and therefore what are the workforce and skills needs. If we can find something close to consensus on the outcome, and then present you, the sector, with what we're looking for, give you the flexibility to deliver that in the way that is most suitable in your areas. We should be focused on agreeing on the outcomes and empowering you to find the best way to get there, rather than us trying to micromanage every one of your institutions.
And finally, Ben.
Strong collaboration and a commitment to work together, looking forward to meet the challenges and opportunities of what is ahead, and through that, reduce spending and tackle poverty and realise opportunity and growth.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. Thank you for squeezing it in, because it was a very important one, I think. Just before I bring Audrey up, can I just say that there are not that many issues in... You'll get a lot of politicians saying they want to have consensus and they agree with each other. There aren't that many issues in Parliament where it's genuinely true, but I think colleges is actually one of them. My experience of the last little while and meeting with all the individuals here and chatting about it is that there is a general consensus in Parliament that something needs to change, that the current situation can't go on forever, but they do need your help. So I think what I would say to people in the room, stakeholders in the room, including colleges in the room, is chat to them, give them ideas. I think they would all like to have that. Don't worry about giving them too many in the next few months. They've got stuff on. But those of the people on this panel who are re-elected in May, please go to them and give them your thoughts as to what the next steps are, because I do think that in this particular sector, consensus is more achievable than it is in probably most others. So I would encourage you to do it. Now, the final word is not for me. The final word is for Audrey Cumberford from the college, principal of Edinburgh College here, who's going to come up and close it for us. Audrey, that microphone may still not be working, Audrey, so let me just give you this one.
Thank you. I did actually go into AI this morning and asked it what was a collective noun for a group of educational spokesperson, and I missed out the father of the house. That might have nailed it actually. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you what it said. So thank you for that. And I've just taken a page of notes on the kind of key things that I heard from all of you guys. And the first thing I wrote, actually just picking up on your point, is that the status quo is not an option. So that seems to be a real consensus from both sofas, that the status quo is not an option, and that we heard more consensus than we heard not, and that the real opportunity of the next 5 years in the next Parliament is to do things differently, but to create that environment that supports sustainability. And that really goes back to a point that was made by a number of you, which is one of the risks is that we see the next year as a sticking plaster and everybody breathes a sigh of relief. And then from a principal's point of view, in 12 months' time, we're back to where we started and we're dealing with the same challenges. Scotland needs an economy that has to grow in terms of tax receipts. And the nature of jobs, again, was spoken about at length. The nature of work is changing, and that's very much in the gift of the college sector and what we do on a daily basis. Something else that came up very strongly was the value of colleges and that rebalancing and refocusing of what colleges are for and what we can do. And I guess I've been around a long time now in the college sector, and I can honestly say, hand on heart, I have not met a politician in all of that time that has said anything other than, I really value colleges. But that's part of the problem, is that there's a big difference between rhetoric and narrative, and actually what a government can do in creating the right environment, policy, funding, etc., to lead and to drive the transformation and the reform that's needed within the sector. And it's not just about the level of funding, that was mentioned a number of times, but a recognition that change, reform, transformation is needed within the wider system. And Willie, that flexibility and agility message has come back loud and clear, and I think is something that I'll never get bored of asking for more flexibility and more agility because of the handcuffs that are currently on us when we're doing the day job. How the sector can actually invest, and again, that it comes back to creating that environment through government where colleges can innovate. And if that means borrowing, if that means looking how we can generate surpluses to then reinvest for the benefits of our students, our staff, and our local communities. The clear consensus on parity of esteem, and again, the challenge there is, and this isn't a race to the bottom and creating a competitive environment between colleges and universities, but it is genuinely about saying, what does parity of esteem actually mean and actually look like when it comes to the government and the government decisions over the next 5 years. And then two final points to make was around the importance of place, and that colleges are distinct, and one of our distinctive characteristics is where we are physically in our local communities with our local people and our local businesses, and therefore I think there's probably consensus in the whole college sector around that regional autonomy and what that means for colleges and what we can be unleashed to do within that environment. And then I like the work is good. We're sitting in a training environment with students up there who are sound production engineers of the future, is that colleges create work simulated environments to inspire our students. And that symbiotic relationship that we have with businesses and with local businesses, again, is where there's some real untapped potential when it comes to economic inactivity and that huge link between poverty and between economic growth. 25% of young children in Edinburgh go to private school. Almost the same amount of children in Edinburgh are living in poverty at the moment, and that's an issue and has to be dealt with. So that's basically a summary of what I heard. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Audrey. Now, I think there's going to be a photo, so if the panel could just sit here for a couple of minutes while that all gets set up. While that's being set up, can I just ask you, the panelists have given up a lot of time during a really busy time. I think you'll agree it's been a good session, so please put your hands together to say thank you to our colleagues.